Um, when we talk about all of these things, COVID, and even just tensions that are happening, so often Christians will turn to prayer. They'll turn to God and just look for God to somehow hear the prayer and respond because of the prayer. So you have a couple questions here on prayer. One says, is there one way you should pray? Does one way work better than another? But another one says, if God allowed the pandemic, then what is the role of Christians and missionaries as well in the church? How can we tell people to come to church when many of our friends say they don't have a need for church and they don't pray, saying that things will happen as it is, like there's no point to pray. So people, in a sense, get discouraged because it's like God doesn't seem to answer prayers. So is there a way that we should pray, and it makes it harder for people to try and tell people, hey, Jesus actually is someone you're interested in, because it doesn't seem like he's answering prayers? Any thoughts on that?
I think the one of the things we all have to wrestle with in prayer is we don't always get what we want. And that's something which is very important to remember. So that doesn't mean, therefore, that God doesn't care or he isn't listening, but maybe it's not going to work out in the way that we actually think it could work out. So what I would encourage anyone who's wrestling with prayer is, if you haven't read it, it's a challenging book to read, but read the book of Job. Because what is fascinating with that is when he's having his human conversation, it's utterly disappointing. If you're going to read the book of Job, you have to remember Job is suffering. Some friends come to comfort him. Almost everything his friends say are wrong. And we know that because at the end of the book, God says everything they said was wrong. So when you're reading the replies of Job's friends to him, just remember that's going to be God's comment at the end. But here's the really interesting thing. In the book of Job, it's a fascinating verse. It comes right up in the very opening chapters. Job loses everything. He comes before God. He pours out his complaint before God. And then it says, and in all of this, Job did not sin by accusing God of wrongdoing. Now that's remarkable. Job came before God and said, God, I think you're wrong. And what you've done is wrong. And it makes no sense. And I'd love to see you justify yourself to me, because I can't see any possible way you could do that. And that tells me something. In your prayer life, if you're coming before God and you're trying to make things better than they really are, you're not going to get very far. That's lying. I mean, we can call it deception or masking or whatever. But if you come before God and say, look, everything's fine, but and you pray like that, but actually inside that's not what you feel, then you're not being honest either with him or yourself. If you come before God and say, this is exactly how I feel, and this is exactly what's going through my heart and mind right now, then at least you're telling the truth. Now, he may not have approved where you are, and he doesn't want you to stay where you are. He wants you to get through it, but it has to start with an acknowledgement of where you actually are. And so when you begin to see prayer, not so much as giving a request list like you would give to a pizza company and asking them to deliver your pizza, but you see it as a conversation, a way to have communion with the one who knows more about what's going in and through this than we ourselves may know, then all of a sudden that's a very different dynamic, and it can have a very different result. So God, I think, does answer our prayers and speak to us through prayer. It may not just simply come in the way that we're always necessarily expecting. And there can be moments in my life now where I can look back and think, God, I wish you had done this, and why didn't you shorten that? And why did I have to go through all of that? With the benefit of hindsight, I can maybe begin to formulate an answer to it. But when I'm in the midst of it, what I've learned now is the main thing I'm asking for is, God, please give me the strength and give me endurance. And even if it comes with tears and with pain and everything else, the one person I know I can trust in all of this is you.
Yeah.
And that makes a big difference.